First of all, apologies. I can't make it to the seminar today in person. I'm afraid we've got a bit of a problem that's cropped up in the constituency, and I've got to stay here and sort it out. But I thought what I'd do is just outline some of the things that I would be saying if I was with you. I want to make 4 particular points. First of all, let me explain what one of our tasks has got to be. We've held these seminars to brief people about what autism is, what being on the autistic spectrum means, explain what people are experiencing, tell them what services we should be arguing for and should be provided, looking at the law and how we can secure legal redress to get those services and support, but then also explain that actually this is a political issue, because people on the autistic spectrum have not been well served, and they have not had the services that they need, and the families have not had the support, and part of our job is to make sure that they're properly represented. Now, part of my job is making sure people on the autistic spectrum and their families and anyone interested in this particular area are properly represented in Parliament. We've set up an all-party group of MPs coming together, and that's been working for a number of years to press government to first of all develop a strategy to address this issue, and we've done that to a certain extent. We've had some successes. We've forced the government to enact in law that there has to be a strategy for both children and for adults, but also to make sure there's proper resources applied so that we can ensure that people get the income that they need, get access to the training and education and employment that they need without discrimination, and that they're protected at work in particular, and then have the whole range of local services that they need to support them as well. So part of our job is making sure we're campaigning on this issue. That's the first thing. The second point I want to make is just to say we've got real problems at the moment. We've got real problems on benefits, for example. Large numbers of people on the autistic spectrum have had to rely upon disability benefits just to ensure they have a basic income. Those benefits, first of all, are being cut, undermined because of the lack of increase in the level of benefits to cope with the increased prices and increased cost of living that we're all facing. But in addition to that, the government have introduced a new system for the assessment of who should go onto disability benefits, employment support, etc. And what they've done, as many of you will know, they've introduced this new system where everyone is being reassessed or assessed through the ATOS system. A private company comes along and undertakes those assessments. And what we've found is that those assessments are grotesquely unfair. People are losing benefits and are suffering. And we've had many, many cases now where people have suffered terrible consequences as a result of this system. We've been raising this in Parliament through trade unions, through our trade union groups and through our all-party groups as well. And we're campaigning all the time. But that's one of the campaigning issues that we've got to address. We've got further problems now coming because the government is introducing shortly the universal credit and also personal independence payments. We feel that they will discriminate against people with disabilities and also undermine the income that they now have and prevent people getting the real benefits that they deserve. So again, one of the issues there we've got to do is monitor the introduction of those new benefits and support people on a case-by-case basis, of course, but campaign for reform, and that will be a key issue for us in this coming period. The other thing that's happening in a couple of weeks' time, coming into the House of Commons, will be a discussion around the Children and Families Bill. What this does, it changes the whole system by which local authorities provide services to children, particularly to children with disabilities and special needs. The statementing process that children now go through, which is difficult but at least does secure in law certain rights to access services, will be changed completely. And our concerns is that on the new system that will be brought in, there will be a lack of adequate representation, a lack of appeal, and as a result of that people will lose out. The other thing is that local authorities will now be told to produce a directory, working with the health service to produce a directory of the local services that they're to provide for children with special needs. And we're concerned that what will happen is, because of local authority cuts, They may well produce that directory and rebadge and rebrand some of their services, but actually it will still mean that people will not get the services that they need at the local level to address the problems that people face as a result of being on the spectrum and give their families support. And it's basic things like funding for transport, funding for access to respite care, funding for access to facilities like trips or training or education, that sort of thing. And again, we'll be monitoring that through our MPs groups, but also we'll be informing trade unions about the issues that we want to campaign upon. Let me just say that also finally what we're facing, and as you know, we're facing £18 billion of cuts by this government from the welfare bill overall, £20 billion worth of cuts in the NHS, and local government cuts on a scale well we've not seen before, even in the 1980s. Some local authorities are having cuts over the next 3 years of something like a third of their budgets. That's impacting upon always, as it always does, the most vulnerable and those people who've had the weakest voice as a result of being vulnerable. Most of those people are people with disabilities. So what we're finding is local authorities closing down basic services, local centres where people go to gain some training, education and just some social life as well. They're being stripped out of local government overall. Support for people going to courses and for training and education, support for their transport, again being cut back. Support for carers, respite, and again withdrawing respite and putting more pressure on families. That's happening right the way across the country. So again, what we've got to do now is highlight to people and expose the cuts that are taking place that are impacting upon the most vulnerable. And some of the most vulnerable are people on the autistic spectrum of all ages. And one of our tasks now is to expose that and to make sure that we campaign against these cuts, joining with others. You've seen and heard about the march we had a year ago, the Hardest Hit campaign, where we got all the disability groups coming together, working with trade unions, lobbying Parliament, and that was very effective in exposing that. We've also had DPAC, the Disabled Peoples Against the Cuts group, formed that's been taking direct action to expose what's happening, particularly with regard to the ATOS system, cutting benefits. Black Triangle, the disability campaigning group up in Scotland, have been exposing exactly what's happening to people. And you know, a few weeks ago in Parliament I read out the research that Black Triangle and DPAC and the Spartacus report had produced, which actually highlighted what we call Callum's List. And Callum's List is a list of those people we know who, as a result of benefit cuts, have committed suicide. And we've tried to expose what's going on, but it needs us now to explain to people that we can't tolerate this anymore. We're supposed to be a civilised society, cutting the benefits of people, the most vulnerable, the most needy, the poorest, and producing consequences like people committing suicide is not acceptable. So part of our job now in this coming period is to resist these cuts. And yes, if that means trade unions marching, if it means direct action, working with other groups, well, let's take that action, because this is too dangerous for people now. Too many people have suffered. And to be frank with you, I think enough's enough, and I hope you'll agree. Apologies for not being there today in person, but I hope the seminar's gone well. I'm sure you've gained a lot from it, and you'll take back to your workplaces and your trade unions the need now to roll out this programme of work on the issue of how we support people on the autistic spectrum and their families, because this is a crucial part of our campaigning in this coming period. Thanks a lot. Solidarity.